Hi there. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, whenever it is that you're watching this video. So this is the second video in our series for chapter 9. It is on 9.2 negative feedback mechanisms. So my expectations for you in this subtopic is that you would be able to explain the negative feedback mechanism in controlling blood glucose. So in the previous lesson, just a quick recap, we defined what is homeostasis and we talked about what are the homeostatic control mechanisms. And we also talked about what are positive and negative feedback mechanisms. It is worth mentioning and remembering that most of homeostasis is negative feedback mechanism. Ya memang banyak negative feedback mechanism sebab kita mau pulangkan badan kita kepada to that ideal internal environment. Dia mesti masuk dalam range yang kita suka. Okay, so in this video, we're going to focus on how negative feedback mechanism works with the changing blood glucose levels. So let's have a look. Okay, first things first, we'll talk about what is blood glucose level. Blood glucose is kandungan gula dalam darah. Okay, so the normal blood glucose level is between 4 to 7 millimole per liter. So kalau kamu tengok diagram ni, jangan kamu tengok yang bahagian atas. Don't look at these middle two. Just look at this final row. Tengok yang paling bawah ni, yang dia tulis glucose millimole per liter. Itulah unit yang kita mau tengok. So if it's between 4 and 7, that is like the good level, yang ngam-ngam. Okay, so macam di sini 4.7, 6.3 is excellent. If it's under 4 millimole per liter, that means your blood does not contain enough glucose. You are hypoglycemic. Kamu mengalami hypoglycemia kalau kandungan gula dalam darah kamu rendah daripada 4 millimole per liter. If it's higher than 7 millimole per liter, that is considered hyperglycemia. That means you have high level of glucose in your blood. Kalau anywhere from 8 to 21.1 ni, kalau yang merah sangat ni memang kencing manis sudah lah. So this is berlebihan gula dalam darah. Okay, so let's look at the organ that is involved. Here we have the endocrine pancreas, which contains the alpha and beta cells of islet of Langerhans. So this is your pancreas. It is next to your liver. It is part of the digestive system. Not all of the pancreas will produce the hormones that we need for controlling blood sugar levels. Only a few specialized cells in the pancreas will do this job. Those cells are called alpha and beta cells of islet of Langerhans. So, akan ada satu kawasan dalam pancreas tu, beberapa kawasan dalam pancreas yang dinamakan sebagai islet of Langerhans. Dalam kawasan ini, kita akan jumpa alpha dan beta cells. So, these alpha and beta cells, their function is when they detect the increasing or decreasing blood glucose level, they will secrete either amylin and insulin, or they will secrete glucagon. Nanti kita tengok apa setiap hormon tu. Untuk sekarang kita akan tekankan kepada insulin dan glucagon. When we talk about controlling blood glucose levels, we focus more on insulin and glucagon. Amylin, we focus on a little bit less because the function of amylin is to aid insulin by effectively slowing the intestinal absorption of glucose and suppressing glucagon. Fungsi amylin, dia lebih kepada macam support lah. Dia akan melambatkan penyerapan glukos dalam usus and suppresses glucagon. Okay, so let's look at what happens when the blood glucose level is high, which is in hyperglycemia. So first, we'll talk about what is hyperglycemia. Kalau orang suruh kamu tulis esay, kamu start dulu dengan bagi definisi hyperglycemia. So hyperglycemia is when you have increase or rise in blood glucose level. The effect of hyperglycemia is it will cause fainting. because there will be low water potential in blood because of the high level of glucose, and water diffuse out from the brain cells by osmosis. So, boleh menyebabkan kita pitam. So, the mechanism of control, you can start by saying that when blood glucose level increases, the beta cells of islet of Langerhans of pancreas can detect the increase in blood glucose. The beta cells will then release insulin into blood. Insulin is distributed to all cells, especially the liver, muscle, and adipose tissues. The insulin stimulates the liver, muscle, and adipose tissues to increase the uptake of glucose. Insulin will increase the rate of glycogenolysis, which is the conversion of glucose to glycogen, and respiration in liver and muscles, and conversion of glucose to fat by liver and adipose cells. At the same time, this control mechanism will inhibit glycogenolysis, which is the conversion of stored glycogen into glucose, and gluconeogenesis, the conversion of amino acids and glycerol and fatty acids into glucose. The blood will then decrease to normal level. Let's go through that again, but this time with a bit more kampung explanation. Bila kandungan gula dalam darah meningkat, yang akan detect adalah beta cells of islet of Langerhans dalam pancreas. Dia sudah detect kandungan gula naik, dia akan lepaskan insulin ke dalam darah. Insulin akan target siapa? Insulin akan pergi kepada semua sel, terutamanya hati, muscle, dan lemak-lemak. So, insulin akan suruh hati, muscle, dan lemak-lemak untuk ambil lebih banyak glukos. Dia akan bagi tahu, "Woi, banyak gula. Ambil kamu." And then this insulin will increase the rate of glycogenesis, penghasilan glycogen. Kedua, dia akan menyuruh liver, which is the hati, and the muscle to use this glucose in respiration. And then any of those extra glucose, when it reaches the sel-sel lemak, kalau adipose tissue yang ambil glucose tu, dia akan tukarkan glucose itu kepada lemak. Liver pun sama, dia akan tukar glucose kepada lemak, which is fat. At the same time, it will inhibit, dia akan kurangkan glycogenolysis. Glycogen yang sudah kena simpan tu, dia tidak akan dipecahkan kepada glukos. Sebab kalau dia dipecahkan kepada glukos, nanti glukos level makin meningkat kan. We don't want that. So, at the same time, it will tell the glycogen that is already glycogen, jangan kamu pecah, you just stay there. It is inhibiting glycogenolysis. Gluconeogenesis, penghasilan glukos baharu. So, it will stop conversion of amino acid and glycerol and fatty acid into glucose. This control mechanism will stop that from happening. It's going to encourage cells to take the extra glucose. It's going to tell the storage, don't make any more glucose. Simpan dulu. And then this will eventually lead the blood glucose to decrease to a normal level. Okay, let's look at what happens during hypoglycemia, which is when blood sugar levels are low. We'll look at the negative feedback mechanism for hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia, give the definition, it is when you have a decrease or a fall in blood glucose level. The effect of hypoglycemia is it will cause fainting. There is not enough glucose supplied to the brain cells. So how does it control? When blood glucose level decrease, alpha cells of islets of Langerhans detect decrease in blood glucose. The alpha cells will release glucagon into the blood. Glucagon will increase the rate of glycogenolysis, which is when glycogen is broken down to glucose in liver cells. It increases the rate of breaking down or hydrolyzed fat into glycerol and fatty acids. This is under the condition where all glycogen is broken down. And it will also increase the rate of gluconeogenesis. Glycerol and fatty acid are converted into glucose in the liver. Glucocorticoids, adrenaline, growth hormone, and thyroxine also raise the blood glucose levels. Glucose levels would increase and go back to normal level. So we are going to go into that with my cincai explanation. Okay, kalau ikut explanation cincai, bila kandungan gula dalam darah menurun, yang akan detect adalah alpha cells. Alpha cell in islet of Langerhans, dia dapat tahu, oh, kurang sudah kandungan gula dalam darah. So, dia akan keluarkan glucagon. Glucagon akan target. Glucagon akan suruh glycogen untuk pecah menjadi glukos. Nama dia glucagon. Jadi, dia akan suruh orang lain hasilkan glukos. Okay, so it's gonna tell glycogen to produce, to break down and make yourself into glucose. And then it's going to tell the fats break down into glucose. If it reaches the liver, it's going to tell the glycerol and the fatty acids to come together and make glucose. Remember, gluconeogenesis means penghasilan glukos yang baru. Selain daripada glucagon, benda lain yang boleh menyebabkan level gula dalam darah untuk tingkat semula adalah glucocorticoids, adrenaline, growth hormone, thyroxine. But in the end, what is important is that the glucose level would increase and go back to normal. So itu sajalah untuk explain pasal hypoglycemia. Ingat, hyper, kalau budak yang hyper kan penuh tenaga lari-lari kan, dia lebih gula. So hyper is too much sugar. Hypo is too little. So this is a diagram to show all the points that I talked about just now. So kamu boleh ikut diagram begini kalau ada stimulus, iaitu blood sugar level naik, apa yang akan terjadi, pergi kepada pancreas, apa hormon yang akan keluarkan, bla bla bla, bla bla bla. Kalau dia punya glucose level terlampau rendah, apa yang terjadi di sini? Okay, dia akan pergi kepada pancreas, pancreas keluarkan apa, bla bla bla, bla bla bla, bla bla bla. So you can take a good look at this diagram on your own. This diagram is the same. Diagram ni lebih kurang sama, cuma di sini dia akan gunakan perkataan seperti beta cells, alpha cells. Kalau diagram tadi, dia tidak menggunakan alpha atau beta. Ini dia menggunakan nama alpha, beta. So, kamu boleh tengok ayat mana satu yang kamu lebih suka. Dua-dua diagram ni adalah betul. Okay, diagram apa lagi ni? So, this is a more I find this diagram more pretty. Kalau kamu mau tengok ini, kamu ikut dia punya warna anak panah. If you want to look at this diagram, look at the color of the arrows. Okay, you can start with a high blood sugar, which is the red one. It promotes insulin release. The pancreas will release insulin. Insulin will stimulate glucose uptake from blood to tissue cells, and this lowers blood sugar. And it also tells the liver to convert glucose into glycogen. And then liver will also lower blood sugar. Okay, kamu boleh gunakan cara ni untuk tengok macam mana proses menurunkan kandungan gula dalam darah. Kalau kandungan gula dalam darah sudah sedia rendah, low blood sugar, then you can follow the green arrow. Okay, so this diagram is focusing mostly on pancreas, which produces insulin or glucagon. And then what does insulin and glucagon do to the liver and to the tissue cells? Okay, I think that's about it. That's about all I want to say. I do want you to have a think. Okay, ini untuk exercise minda kamu. People with diabetes, yang ada kencing manis, they need to get a regular insulin injection. So what you can think about is their blood level too high or too low? Nama dia kan sudah kencing manis. So their blood sugar level, is it too high or too low? And how does that insulin help their condition? Last but not least, think whether or not they can survive without insulin injections. How can they survive without insulin injections? try to think about that. It will be good for you to refresh your knowledge on this using these questions. Now that we've reached the end of the video, I hope that you're able to explain negative feedback mechanisms using the example of regulation of blood glucose level. So what should you do now? Please go to Google Classroom and find the worksheet for 9.2, complete it, and after that, mark your answers using the answer scheme given. I hope that you're able to stay on task for this week. All the best and happy learning.